Hey, so hi everybody. Thank you for coming on this rainy Friday afternoon. You've all got clay, and I see lots of hands working, which is really nice. I just kind of have an easy steps here. You've got your round ball of clay. You push your thumb into the center. Obviously, don't go through, because then you make a bagel instead of a bowl. And then just rotate while pinching, and you'll find that if you start at the base, you will be able to bring that clay up. At a certain point, your hand isn't going to be able to get down to the bottom. So if you start at the base, and I'm just softly pinching and rotating, and then moving up as I pinch and rotate. And if it was quiet, which it kind of is, but if you just take your eyes off it for a few minutes, and just feel what's happening, and you are creating a functional object from clay, which a few minutes ago was a lump. And I think there's something really special about that. It's what drives me every day. It's what I love about my material of choice. And you might find, I was a little nervous before I came in here. I'm already calm because I've got clay in my hands. You might find that it's calming, a little bit meditative. Don't beat yourself up if something goes wrong, right? Big deal. Stick it back together. It's clay. You've got a little water container next to you as well, and if you want to, carefully of course, take off the lid, you might find that that rim, because that rim has to stretch more than the rest of it, every once in a while the rim will crack. Just put a little pressure, run a little water, and those cracks will be gone. It's like magic. So this is a process that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years. 30,000 years ago, the first functional object was made from clay and fired, which is pretty cool. 30,000 years, right? So at the end of this, you each have a little piece of paper with your name, or for a place for your name, if you're a faculty member, your department, your email, and after these are done, we're going to take them back to the studio. We're going to bisque fire them, which means firing out the water, and then we're going to horsehair fire them and deliver them back to you with beautiful finishes. They won't be food safe, but they'll be beautiful. So if you get stuck at any point, if you're having struggles, feel free to just holler, and I'll do what I can to help you out. All right, so let's talk about craft. Right? Aren't they cute? Right. So I think it's important, we're in an academic institution, to make a distinction between art and craft, because there's a distinction, but it's also a soft distinction. It's a meandering distinction. There have been arguments about it. There have been full-on kind of disruptive movements in the art community about art and craft, but the way that I like to define, and the way that, feel free to grab some clay, the way that I define and the way that I think works really well is that art expresses emotions, feelings, and visions, right? It relies on artistic merit and the intention of the artist, right? So right now, your intention is making a bowl out of a hunk of clay, not particularly artistic, right? If you were instead thinking, I'm going to make 200 of these bowls, and I'm going to place them on the graves of soldiers who were the cooks in the past wars, right? Then we're talking about a more artistic element. It's the intention of the work that drives the art very often. Craft, on the other hand, involves the formation of physical objects by use of the hands and brain. It's based on learned and practiced skills and techniques. So, I'm a pretty firm believer that it takes a certain amount of craft to make the art, right? That the skills of the craft then can be transposed into art. So creating art often requires the skills of a craftsperson. This is Faith Wielding's Crocheted Environment, a very beautiful feminist piece, also called The Womb Room, and it was all crocheted, Right, you can see in the detail, this is all crocheted. It was a very famous piece of work. It's been displayed a number of times in a number of places. Artist Sonia Clark is performing unraveling, right? So every seamstress knows how to deconstruct a seam. That's no trick, right? But the intention of the artist then turns that skill into art. She's a black woman deconstructing, unraveling the Confederate flag. And she's done this in a number of exhibitions, and she invites other people to help deconstruct. She uses really heavy, heavy cotton flags that are manufactured for the purpose of people who want to fly a Confederate flag to fly it, right? And then by deconstructing it, it becomes art. Rarely, however, does the craft alone become art. And that's something to notice too. I love this quote from Robin Hopper, and I wish I had a better slide of it, but it's significant that in many of the world's languages, there is no word for art. Art is the result that comes from the activity known as craft. I think that's a nice way to define it and kind of get that in our heads. All right, so again, let's talk about craft. Love these ladies. In many cultures, crafts are just a daily part of the ritual. People need things, right? And you don't walk by a palm tree and think like, hey, I'm sure I need a palm to roof my home, right? But in certain cultures, there are places where they will weave the fibers of the palms into thatching for roofs, right? We turn, go ahead, yep, we turn clay and hay into bricks to make adobe homes, right? Very, very functional. A lot of people are familiar with raku pottery. We talk about that. That whole movement started when there was a huge tornado in Japan, and or probably a hurricane, but it blew the shingles off of most of the homes, or shingles, it blew the roofs off of homes. They needed ceramic to cover the roofs, and so raku wound up happening. It was a fast way to fire, but again, not art. It was a craft that was functional. These are the mastered quilters of Gee's Bend. If you haven't looked them up, please do. They're a wonderful, wonderful group of people making these classic crafts that are, once they were discovered, have now become worth thousands and thousands of dollars. But in their minds, they're not artists, they're craftspeople, which I kind of love. So research shows a substantial increase in craft making during times of uncertainty and strife. Right? Uncertainty and strife. Have we had any uncertainties and strifes recently? Yeah, a few of those, right? Can you go back? I love this. This is so great. Instructions for knitting: sweaters, mufflers, helmets, socks, wristlets, washcloths, and bottle covers from the American Red Cross. This is during World War I. I think it's so cute. Right? Ladies were knitting for the soldiers. Not just ladies. But yeah, World War I saw the rise of these knitting clubs. And there was a theory that, or not just a theory, but a movement towards patriotism, that if you weren't knitting, you weren't doing your bit, right? That said, many women and people at home were also employed in the factories and were also making munitions and all sorts of things. But the fact that those who didn't were called on to knit is wonderful. There's also, are there any knitters in the crew? No? Yeah, a little bit. There's a specific stitch that was developed because some of the socks that went to the soldiers would rub against their toes and cause foot scarring, and so they came up with a kind of a slip stitch that tucked the opposite way so that the toes would be saved, and it's named after the woman who invented it and then put it in books. So yeah, I love this. Our boys need socks. Knit your bit. In 1913, right, tuberculosis was raging all over the place. In the Aquafina Tuberculosis Sanatorium in Marin County, California, people who were bedridden from tuberculosis were given handcrafts to do. So they were given embroidery, they were given sewing, they were given braiding, and the reward for getting healthy enough to get out of bed was that they could go work in the pottery studio, which I love. Right? It's a reward to come to the pottery studio. That makes me really happy. But this pottery then went on, and people started collecting the pieces. They weren't always beautiful. They were made by, you know, people who were just getting done with TV. But there were such healing powers in these crafts, and there was a movement towards wanting to be able to do these things that helped people to heal. And this pottery went on for about 50 years after the TB, it is an epidemic, I don't know, that after TB was taken out of everyday lives, I guess, is a way to talk about it. During the Great Depression, it's, you know, you think about the 20s, you think about the roaring 20s and all the glamour and all the beauty that was a part of that, and then the Great Depression, right? And so people wanted beauty. People understood that, oh, beauty in the homes makes the home a happy place. Yet, all of a sudden, everybody's impoverished and they don't have enough money to make things beautiful. But a big movement started with using old things to turn into other beautiful things. A lot of quilting, furniture making, decoupage, which is really interesting. It's glass with paper and glass, so melting glass and paper together to make colored, almost faux stained glass. Big craft movement towards that. Corn husk dolls, embroidery, the paper crafts, and a lot of toy making happened. And both men and women took part in this. Repurposing broken down items into new, beautifully crafted items for sale. I love that sewing bag. Isn't that lovely? It's a burlap sack. And even those handles, you know, are made and a rod put through to make a sewing bag. And cheese crates turned into an occasional table. Lovely. This is Aaron Toole, and I just got to spend a lot of time with him at our National Conference for Ceramics in Cincinnati, but he returned from the 1991 Gulf War deeply affected. He suffered from PTSD. He was doing nothing but drinking and staying in dark places and was not being very healthy. And he had taken a ceramics class in high school, and he thought, you know, I kind of enjoyed that. And his wife, thinking this might be something good, found him a potter's wheel, and he started making cups. And just started making cups, and he literally just makes cups. But he put this out there to somebody saying, yeah, I just kind of started making cups, and his buddies would say, man, could you make me a cup with my insignia on it? And they would have a badge from their uniform, and they would have an award badge, and he would press that into the clay and make it more personalized for them. Then he discovered decals, and he discovered all sorts of different ways to make, and he continues to make cups. A lot of cups. Right, so he's now, since he began making seriously in 2021, he's made over 22,000 cups, nearly all of which have been given away to veterans and their families. So he does, every year as well, he does a shooting of cups, just random, lines lots of them up and just takes shots at a few of them. Right, how impactful is that? That's when the craft turns into the art, right? When it gets turned into that, but it's absolutely beautiful. And if you approach him at any time and say, hey, I'm a veteran, I love what you're doing with the cups, you've got a cup in your hand in 2 seconds flat. I saw it happen at NCCA a number of times. It's really awesome, and he just feels that it's a positive thing to do from all the unpleasantry that he encountered. Love him for that. There's another project called Combat Paper that starts with crafting paper from old service uniforms. So when warriors come back from all sorts of different conflicts, all the Afghan vets, all these people are coming back, and you know, you have your uniform, it's the memory of the thing, but it's so the memory of the thing, right? By deconstructing, by ripping up the fabric, by turning it into pulp, they are then repurposed into paper. And from that paper, then art. So they use these papers, they sometimes collaborate with other artists. A lot of them are learning different artistic fields, but it all started with this combat paper. Again, a wife of a vet wanted to do something to kind of help, and it wound up turning into this huge movement. And if you go to the combatpaper.org, down here, there's a really beautiful, you can see how many people are involved. There's just thousands and thousands of people involved, but they'll do workshops in different cities, and people from all over can just bring in their uniforms and learn how to turn those into the pulp and learn how to repurpose them into something beautiful, which I think is so, so wonderful. All right, so this is New York Times. Notice the date, right? This was after our first year of lockdown. Remember the lockdown? Wasn't that fun? I think it's sometimes hard to remember, right? But we were homebound, we were stuck. And those of us who were in university, it was the middle of March, and all of a sudden, like, poof, you can't go back, for me, you can't go back to your studio. For all the students, you can't go back to school. You can't see your roommates, your friends. You can't see your family members, if that was the situation. All of our international students were just stuck, right? So, two things, we were isolated. The other is that we had time. Well, those of us who were teaching did not, because all of a sudden we had to make videos like crazy and hybridize and try to flip our classes around, right? But without going anywhere, we wound up with time on our hands, which was really interesting. So a lot of making started to happen. We sewed. I sewed a lot of masks. I got crazy with sewing. Everybody sewed. We knit, right? Lots of knitting. This is Perry Class, MD, in a stressful time knitting for calm and connection, right? And I love this. If you Google the two words knitting and pandemic together, you'll get about 23 million hits. Crazy, right? Also, knitting through the pandemic or knitting with COVID, 226 million hits, right? It wasn't like just a few people were knitting, right? Why do you think that happens? Why would all of a sudden everybody decide that they needed to learn how to knit, right? You got a little time on your hands. You want to do something with it. We also made pottery. This is one of my former students who started doing videos during that time, and now he was a featured speaker at this NCCA that we had. He's like, oh my gosh, his videos are really good. I love that. So this is the one piece that I really want you guys to just take a moment and read. Pottery is the perfect tactile pastime for now, say its fans. This is again 2021, and a great antidote to the digital world. The tyranny of working and communicating digitally is one reason the recent appetite for crafting. It's the perfect antidote to the online world, and of all the crafts, perhaps pottery does this most successfully. The messiness of working with wet or damp clay and the need to follow a process to achieve results forces practitioners to put their phones and tablets aside. Now is a time when many of us yearn to slow down and focus on a single absorbing activity. Ah, COVID. Right? And it's strange to us to think about that, but think about the cultures that came before us, and think about the Native Americans that would, before they became as nomadic, they would find a vein of clay, and there was some time, and there was a community that needed something, and they could create that something from the clay that was there. They did exactly what you guys are doing right now, right? You are now connected with all of these cultures from 30,000 years ago. We find something that we can make something out of, and we make something useful out of it. I love the usefulness that comes from it. Makes me very happy. And if just the making wasn't enough, right? The crafts might be modest and homespun, but the money they're generating was not. A booming trade on Etsy more than doubled the company's revenues to a record $1.7 billion in 2020. How crazy is that, right? Everybody was making stuff, and everybody was selling stuff, and everybody was buying stuff. Thank goodness for those of us who make, that people continue to buy. But I think that is just astounding. When so many people were out of jobs, when so many people couldn't go back to their workplaces, they would pick up and start making. And making is good for us. So, what can craft do for you? Right? So these are some beautiful, I'll get into the book that that's recently been published about this, but Crafting gives people a sense of independence and a sense of security. I made this, right? I made this, and I solved the problems involved in making it. That is accomplishment. How often do you feel that? Right? That doesn't happen that often, right? I don't know. Every time I'm at the computer, I'm like, oh God, I screwed something up again, right? There's a lot more problems involved in computers than there is in a lump of clay, but there is a sense of accomplishment. There is a sense of finish. There is a sense of done. I've done this thing. I followed the steps and it worked, and that feels great. Crafts and craft therapies are known to ease stress, right? Improve mental health by instilling skill-based feelings of productivity and self-esteem. So here we are, we're making something. We're being productive, right? It's very different than just sitting on the couch and watching the newest episode of Ted Lasso, which you should all check out. But if you can do something while you're doing that, you walk away feeling productive, feeling like you did something. I accomplished something in that hour, which is beautiful. This is a new book that came out in 2020 that's very good. It's called Craft and Art Therapy. Art therapy is a wonderful field. The premise of art therapy has always been that the emotions that are causing the problems, the emotions, the feelings, the mental health issues that are causing those problems need to be expressed in an outer way, right? Which is then the artist mentality, right? The I am expressing, I'm using visual language to say something. I'm using visual language to express myself, rather than maybe self-destructive behaviors, right? Using visual language, creating a story using visual language. But this author, Lauren Leone, believes that, and has a lot of research that went into this book, but believes that the simple repetition of a skill-based activity can do as much for mental health. Again, as we're saying, there's a sense of accomplishment, there's a sense of learning, there's a sense of becoming better, becoming smarter, becoming more capable. And all of those things are really good for mental health. And I love that about both this book and just that attitude. So, craft, right? Right? Yarn bombing, I love it. It's so great, especially when it's not trees. But right, but making things with your hands imparts a sense of control, real or imagined, when it feels like the world, when it feels like it's spinning apart. Right, and I think a lot of us felt that during COVID, like holy cats, zombie Armageddon, what's going on? Like, will this ever end? Will we ever have our former lives back? But we could control the things that we made. You could control, if you were working with clay, you could control your clay. I know certain Dr. Pritchard started taking up painting and started taking up coloring and started taking up those kinds of crafts. A lot of us did. Yeah, paper craft. Yeah. Yeah, it felt good, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big help now.
Yeah, absolutely. So clay acts almost like an antidote to the overwhelm of the digital world. It interrupts your compulsive email checking. Your mind has a single focus, so the practice can feel meditative and therapeutic. Do you feel like you've been to therapy? Mm-hmm. Yeah, with your little bowl? Feeling a little relaxed? It's Friday. No panic. Yeah, I like it. I just couldn't resist, right? So this is the Alta Loma Luxury Rehab Center in Texas, right? And this is like the quote on one of their front pages that just killed me, right? Crafting is one of the many ways to stimulate your mind when you find yourself overwhelmed by the problems that you cannot control. Instead of dwelling on your depression or anxiety, crafts will give you something positive and creative to focus on. This is one of the places where the stars go, right? This is like a big dollar place, and I love that they're like, the therapy that they're recommending is craft. God bless them. It's like they asked me for a quote. I would have given them that one. Right, so here's what I did during the pandemic. Lots and lots of videos with processes. Can you click on the first blue? Yep, see if that works. Will it work? There There we go.
Hi everybody. I am giving you a really great extra credit project. If you want to go into your backyard or your front yard or the neighbor's yard or wherever, you can be safe, right? We were just gardening out here and I found some clay. So I'm going to show you how to process this.
There you go. Yep, you can kill it.
It's also kind of,
No, don't stop.
Oh, yeah? You want to learn more?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, you can subscribe.
fun to see all the things that are growing. This is going to be kale, and those are going to be beans, and these are going to be snap peas. You know,
My video game is
we've got to
very
plan
strong.
ahead.
Yeah.
So these were the hunks of clay that I kind of pulled out of the garden when we were working on it, and you can just feel it in the garden when they're squishy and they kind of stick together. But what I'm going to do now is bust them up into just a ice cream bucket. So that's the next step. I let them dry a little bit. If they're not dry, you know, whatever, it's going to work anyway. But I did let these dry for a couple of days before I'm busting them up. Up to you.
Here's how to find
All right.
clay.
So how do you know if you have found clay? Right? Like I said, there's a
If you
lot
live
of
in
it, but
Evansville,
it's
you
not
have
just
clay.
everywhere. Right? You've got to do a little digging. And so what I'm looking for when I'm digging, and you can kind of see it in here a little bit, is a change of color from just black to kind of a amber brown. And there I can see, ooh, that's a good shot. Right there, right? So you can kind of see that there's a little vein of clay going through there. It's not a ton, but the other thing that will tell you, besides color, is of course the qualities of the material. So I'm just going to squish this, and you see how some of it is just turning, or is just dusting off, but some of it is kind of coming together.
The frame. Nice
If
job.
it comes together, it's clay, right? If this was all just dirt, I could squish
figured
it.
it out, though.
Oops, sorry. I'm watching my hand and not the video screen. If it was just dirt, I could squish it endlessly and it would just powder into nothing. So I'm just going to add this to my bucket there, but like this,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where was Benny the cameraman?
Right. Where was Benny the cameraman?
I was making lunch.
Yeah, there you go.
Important.
And if you go back down to the, yep, there you go. Oops. Now we get to go back through all those. Sorry. But so there, you know, these are my silly videos, but there are a lot of videos. I went through a whole thing with my students about where to find clay, how to find clay. Then we go through processing it, how to turn it from just the stuff in your yard into clay that actually works and can be fired. And then we went through firing without a kiln, right? Barbecue grill. You can fire your work in a barbecue grill. And I made Erica a little vase. She had given me a bunch of seeds for my garden, and so I made her a little vase out of the clay that I dug out of my garden, which was a beautiful thing. Again, is it art? Is it craft? Well, I couldn't have made that vase if I didn't have some craft skills. But somehow in the whole circular nature of the project, it wound up in my mind turning into art. I don't know. What do you think? Yeah.
Very phallic art.
Yeah, it's a very phallic piece that I made. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. Oh, actually, yeah, do the next YouTube
They
so
hold
we
the
can
butt
see it.
very well.
Yeah.
hey, we're back. I told you the next episode would be firing, but I thought, you know, maybe you want to see what I made with that little 1 pound of garden clay. So here's my little pot.
Phallic.
This one's going out to Erica Anderson. It's a little bud vase that I made her for giving me all those beautiful seeds. And I think it's kind of fun, right? It's
Go ahead and kill it. I do. I think it's kind of fun, right? This is how I got through the pandemic, and hopefully some of you were able to find some clay and do some of these kinds of projects to get through the pandemic. I actually, once we were able to get back into the studio, I didn't have a horrible time with the pandemic. I was lucky enough to not have family loss or the loss of close friends, so that kind of helps. But so anyway, if you want to bring some craft into your life, how do you do it, right? Maybe you think, oh, I don't have time. But I'm willing to bet that you spend at least 4 hours a week watching TV. right? I'm gonna guess that. What if you were making something while you were doing that? All of a sudden that becomes productive time. All of a sudden you've done something good for your heart and good for your soul and good for your self-worth. So I would recommend that, and lots of videos, not just mine, obviously. A lot of people who are very good at doing videos have done some miraculous videos on working at home on these kinds of things. The New Harmony Clay Project, which is only a little ways away from you guys here, right? The New Harmony Clay Project offers classes, open studios, and date nights from June until August. So if it's the summertime and you're thinking, man, that Al, she seems pretty well adjusted, I should really get into clay, right? Here you go. There's a place, and this young lady right here might be your teacher. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Joanne Fabric, I don't have I'm not sponsored by them, right? But they have a wonderful website, and they're no longer Joanne Fabric, now they're Joanne Fabric and Craft, and they have a wonderful, wonderful list of resources, lots of videos to just start learning how to make something. And the beauty is just to get started, and then you push yourself a little bit, and then you want to learn a little more. And that's a great place to start. Or you could take a class at USI. How about that? Right? So we've got, I do Ceramics 1 every spring at night, for those of you who work during the day. We have, these are all entry level that don't require prereqs, right? So take a color and design course if you think you like 2-dimension. Learn about color theory and just try your hand. Try your hand at design. Design and materials deals with a lot of different 3D materials. Absolutely wonderful to work with and learn from. And drawing, right? Drawing class, again, no prereq, and maybe that's where you want to start, right? Maybe you want to start with drawing. So those are my suggestions for getting some craft into your life. Thank you. How are your projects? Yes?
Are you taking any questions?
Yes, I am, yeah.
So if you didn't, I don't want to get in trouble, but I made a face instead of a bowl. Is that okay? Or?
For you, sir, yeah, this is a non-graded activity. And do you feel like you relaxed a little bit? And
I'm so calm.
Nice.
Calm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't sit down. Period.
Right on. Well, well done. I'm impressed. Yes, yeah, your face is beautiful.
I think I believe in you.
Okay, I think that's enough now.
I know. You gotta love it though, right? But yeah, traditionally, craft, especially in the academic realm, has kind of gotten a bad rap. And my point of wanting to do this, it was also part of sabbatical when I was in Montana. There, you know, it's a population of like 4,000 in this town that I was in, and they had a really, really bourgeoning craft scene. They had clay, and they had knitting circles, and they had square dancing, and they had all sorts of just really great activities that were not necessarily artistic in any way, but they were activities that would stimulate. And I think that craft does that, and I think it's important to keep that as part of our realization. And all of you who have taken my ceramics classes know, right, that when we're making bowls, that clay one, that first project that we do with students, they learn how to throw bowls on the potter's wheel. It's not art. Boy, it's not art. You know? But it's learning skills. It's learning skills and techniques, and they practice, and then those skills and techniques turn into really good skills and techniques. And then once those skills take hold, they start thinking about what they might do with those skills. And then the things that they start doing with those skills become the art. So I'm a big believer in starting with the craft. And not everybody does. Not everybody wants to go on and make a masterpiece or make something that's more complicated. A lot of people are like, you know what? I like making bowls. I'm gonna keep making bowls. I'm gonna make mugs. I like making mugs. And that is a great place to be as well. For as long as people are going to make mugs and bowls, there will be people who want to use mugs and bowls. So all is well in the arts and crafts community. great plug. And I'm looking at you, Shannon, but right behind you, Miss Delaney just said, don't forget about the student sale. So we're having a student sale too. April 5th and 6th, it's Wednesday and Thursday. It'll be under the cone. So wait, oh, look at that, she's got her phone out, I love it. Yeah, April 5th and 6th, Wednesday and Thursday from 10 to 4 both days. So come and check out what the students have been working on, both art and craft. We've got a lot of each. All right, yes, Dr. Pritchard? I know, I'm playing.
You know, just thinking about like the history of clay and everything, I don't know if you're aware of it, but like for the Mayans, and this is just floating around like back in my mind somewhere, but I remember like when I took this like Mesoamerican art history class, and we read this book called The Popol Vuh, and it's kind of like the Mayan version of the Bible. It's like a creation, like how man was created, and then that story, you know, God creates man from clay.
From clay,
you
yeah.
know, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things like that. And the Greeks have a story about like, the first clay work, and you know, kind of breathing life into those objects. Yes,
Do you think we're craft or art?
Some people aren't for sure.
Right.
I think most of us are craft.
Nice.
But I wonder also, like, I think, you know, during the pandemic and things like that, when everybody starts making, you know, and kind of, one of the things that I found that was really interesting is that people really did want the arts. They did want arts and crafts. They turned to museums. They wanted museums
Yes,
to
a
do
lot of
things.
that too.
They don't want to fund it.
Right.
During the good times.
Right.
But in that time.
Yeah, so many walkthroughs, yeah.
Yeah, and then just in that shutdown, you know, people wanted access to the arts.
Yeah.
That's the thing that kept making people feel better, music
Yeah.
and art, making stuff, learning how to
Yeah.
quilt, making sourdough bread.
Yeah.
And all of these
Lots of
things
bread.
require putting the phone down and the
Yes,
computer down.
exactly,
Right?
yeah.
And maybe getting away from that.
Yeah,
you know,
from the buzz of
From the buzz,
yeah.
yeah, because you can't make this.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I always tell my students no cell phones during class, because they'll get destroyed.
Yeah.
Because they will. But yeah, it's really nice to take a break from all the technology. And that said, though, there is a lot of technology that can assist in getting started with
Of
those crafts, you know.
course, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's nice to actually use your hands for something other than pushing buttons.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I love it. What else? Anybody questions? Yes?
The technique on there I've seen you use on a lot of your pieces, the white crackly kind of thing. How do you achieve that?
Yeah, it's a glaze that just shrinks more than the clay body.
Yeah.
So when it goes on, it covers the entire surface, and then as it dries, it moves away from itself and crackles like that. It's been around forever. It's a glaze that has been in use since the late 60s, but it wasn't a food safe glaze. So when I was in graduate school, I researched and worked with it until it became food safe, so it doesn't flake off into your food. You know, yeah, that's a bad idea. But yeah, thanks. But yeah, people will ask, "Are you an artist or a craftsperson?" And I always say, "Well, I'm a potter," because that's easier. But I think of myself as both, because I really do. There are days if I'm having a hard day, I'll just go into the studio and I just want to fill a wearboard. It's not masterpieces in any way, shape, or form, but I want to make 50 bowls and just call it a day, because that feels really good. It's like that. I can do that. I did it. I solved the problems necessary to make that happen, and those days are as good as when I come up with some brilliant new idea that I'm like, oh my God, if I make this, it'll change the world. None of us changed the world yet, except in my mind, but yeah, I think the combination is the right place to land personally, for me anyway.
And is potter the preferred term, or like ceramicist, or what is
It depends, yeah, people like different things, My pronoun is potter.
is potter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Can I inspire anybody to take more clay classes and more art classes?
I think the potter thing is kind of a self-different, it's like chefs who want to be called cooks.
Right.
You know.
Well,
Because it says they are cooks, and they're,
Right.
you know, that's their craft.
Right,
The
they're
art is
craft,
the chef,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I know what you mean, absolutely. But I just know that what brings me the most joy is the making.
Being a cook.
Being a cook, yeah, exactly. That said, like, you know, when you get invited to have a big exhibition somewhere, it's like, oh my God, it's so exciting. But I would rather have 10 days in the studio than 10 days doing that. Yeah,
It's just words.
it is
Just
just
words.
Just words?
Yeah,
Jeez.
words.
What do I know?
Right? Yeah, I wonder about that. Are you a writer or a poet? Like, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a poet at all, never.
Never.
It's too creepy.
Yeah, just poet laureate
Of Indiana.
of Indiana here. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Hopefully, yes.
I was just wondering, what could you tell us about Dean Ox's event tonight?
Oh well, it's not specifically Dinakis's event, but it's faculty members have created a documentary film about John James Audubon, and it will be shown in Forum 1 at 7 o'clock tonight, which is pretty exciting for our faculty to have made this film about this wonderful person who was in the area. So, yeah. And Dean Aukes was able to make a print from a lost plate that was, one of the Audubon plates was lost for a very long time, and they found it, and they asked him and Brett Anderson to print it, and so it was printed, and that's why Dean Aukes is here for that. Yeah, our former dean. So pretty excited about that for all you students. All right, so you've got a sheet of paper with your clay that has on there a place to put it. Oh, before you do that though, you'll want to do that while your pencil's clean. After you write your name and your contact information, feel free to flip your pot over and write your name on it. I just know that sometimes those are really hard to read. So I would like it on paper as well. You can put your paper inside the pot, and then the paper and pot can go back into the bin, and I will contact you when those are fired and done. And then they can remind you of the importance of craft in your life. All right, thank you all for coming. Much appreciated.